get a tattoo. Do not get a tattoo.
Right? Because, like, there are some Bedouins in Morocco, but, like, people go and pay, like, mad money to go to Merzouga and, like, glamp. And I'm like, we don't do that. Set up the, like, because why? You all go and pay for, like, the dumbest shit. Like, why are you going out to the desert? I'm like, I'm going to be here for 3 nights.
You're talking to the wrong white woman, because nothing could get me to go stay in a tent for 3 nights. Literally nothing. You'd be like, well, this is the only place we can live. The rest of the planet has been destroyed by pollution. I'd be like, well, I guess I'm going to die here with my bag of Cheetos and my hot shower.
No, yeah, there's a Tumblr post that's like, you all talking about how you're going to survive the apocalypse, but when the apocalypse comes, I'm going to lock myself in the house, lay on my divan, and wait to die, and that's me. Like, I'm not going to be fighting anybody for food. I do not want it.
Also, I'm not going to run.
No. Sometimes I watch scenes where people are in a panic and are like running, and I'm like, I think I would just lay down. Like, if I fell, I wouldn't get up.
See, there's a new Mission Impossible movie, and Tom Cruise runs, like, full out for, like, 6 minutes straight. And I was like, I would just lie down.
I would just be like,
on the bridge and be like, Henry Cavill can get away.
Yeah. Well, then somebody would be in my ear like, get up. I'd be like, no. I'm done.
Somebody bring me some Gatorade. I feel dehydrated.
Where is the car? Come get me. I'm tired.
I want to open this up to questions. I'm not sure how much time we have left.
You have 15 minutes.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, wow.
Do we have questions?
I saw a hand over here.
If you keep them to Twitter length. Yeah. I will repeat the question for everyone in this room.
First question is, so I noticed that you said during the 19th century, especially taken off. You said that the translation was used somehow to organize. Did you notice similar trends between Orientalist translations of the Quran and later translations of Arabic literature and
Yes. Do you
I
have
cannot possibly repeat that.
Okay, so she's asking me about my dissertation research and if there are correct me if I'm wrong, if there are like correlations or links between the Orientalized translations of the Quran and like other Arabic literature. Yes. So when I first started doing research for the poetry, like the first place I go to is Google, because then I can just write down a bunch of names and then go like ask people or all of this other stuff. So one of the poems is by this badass woman named Walada bint al-Mistakfi, right? Who's just look her up. She's amazing. But so there's this, so the gist of it is she had this like widely publicized affair with Ibn Zaydun, and he laughed at a Jariya who's like a slave girl in her poetry salon. She lost it. She like wrote screeds of poetry about him, had him driven out of the city in exile. And then you're like, that's enough, Walada, like you've done it. And then she took up with his political rival. Like a badass, right? So she's also one of the most proficient poets of her time, right? Like she rivaled the best. So there's, on her Wikipedia page, there's a poem that is to Ibn Zaydun, and it's about like how dare he look at another woman, and it's translated to denigrate the slave girl based on the color of her skin. So I'm looking at the Arabic and I'm like, there is no reference to her skin color in this poem anywhere. And I'm like, but like 11th century Arabic is different. It's like a whole other beast. So I called up my aunt, because my aunt and my mom both have degrees in Arabic literature, and I was like, can you, like, what am I missing in this poem? And she was like, let me call you back. And she called her professor friend in Rabat, and they finally got back to me and they were like, there's no reference to skin color. What that poem is about is the moon, which is bigger in the sky and brighter, and Jupiter, which is smaller in the sky and dimmer. And Walada is the moon, and the slave girl is Jupiter. And she's saying, how could you go to Jupiter when you have the moon in your sights already, right? And that somehow got translated by a 19th century scholar to be a comment about her skin color. It is nowhere in the text. It is nowhere in the context. There is no proof this Jariya was black or brown, because slaves came from everywhere in 11th century Cordoba. And yet somehow, some asshole white dude in the 19th century was like, she's blacker than me. Right, and that's not to suggest that Arabs don't have like racism in them, but that's not what's existing in the text, and that's not what's existing in the historical context. And yet somehow this happened, right? And this is like not even to speak about the stuff that gets sort of peddled, like the Vath are named after, this showed up in a review, and I was like, wow, okay. The Vath are named after this book that came out in the 18th or 19th century called Vathic by William Beckford. And it's an entirely fabricated story, like based in the Arab world, that he peddled as a translation of an original text. And so for a long time, people were like, oh, where's the original text? It doesn't exist. It's fake. And it's obviously fake. And only like a 19th century white person would be like, wow, this sounds real. Right? So there's a lot, like it's not just the religious text, it's like, it's sort of everything, because you get, the other thing too is that like Arabic in the 19th century wasn't studied as literature, it was studied from a philological point, right? So like the construction of the language and the ways that it's connected to other languages, right? Like you get the language tree in the 19th century, right? But you get these philologists who say things like Arabic is the most boring literature in the world, and like, I don't understand why anyone would commit their studies to that. And I'm like, you wish you could write like Walid ibn al-Mustafi. Like, okay.
I'm going to ask you actually to put the poet's name, if you're willing, into your Twitter feed tonight,
Yes.
so that we can actually look her up.
I've resisted for a long time talking about the poets, because I know what's gonna happen is some white girl is gonna be like, I'm gonna write a book about Walid ibn al-Mustafi, and I'm like,
No, I'm gonna get a tattoo of her.
You're gonna get somebody who writes the Arabic backwards and disconnected. I see this all the time. Arabic is from right to left, right? Yeah, right to left, not left to right. I see it left to right and disconnected. Like there are signs on the University of Washington campus that's supposed to say there is no hate here, and I don't know that because it's written this way. Oh, no. And I'm like, you didn't even punch that shit into Google Translate?
I just feel like we should all wear shirts that say we tried. All right, I am, because that was a long one.
Yeah.
I'm going to open up to yes, front row.
Oh, I have a question. You've talked about how you worked on translations with your mom and your aunt, and you talked about loving like female courtly intrigue. What was it like working with other women of color, like reclaiming both the story and like the translations of Arabic poetry you put in there? Like,
it was really fun. It was really great because if you get raised in an Arabic-speaking country, then you get raised with the Arabic poetry canon. So they had a lot of on-hand knowledge that like the average scholar or like person just wouldn't have, because Arabic is a really difficult language to learn. And so like it's really fun when you realize that like 11th century Arabic doesn't use vowel markings or punctuation. So you're like reading, so I was reading, this isn't another interview, but I was reading Ibn Sari's Concerts of the Khulafa, which is like a fantastic biography of women in like between 10th and 14th century Baghdad. It's in translation and paperback, and it's fabulous. But it does this thing where the Arabic and the translation are side by side, and so I'm like reading the Arabic, and I'm like, wow, this sentence has been going on for a long time. It didn't. There's just no punctuation, like. And so, like, I show it to my mom, and she's like, obviously the sentence ends there. And I'm like, obvious to who? Because it's not obvious to me.
It was true in English, too. We didn't have punctuation for a good long time.
Yeah.
We were like, pick your own.
I assigned Middle English to my freshman once, forgetting that not everyone is a trained medievalist.
As you do.
And they all came back to class.
I forget that all the time.
Because I took Chaucer when I was like a sophomore or a junior, and my professor was like, it's really easy, everything looks how it sounds. And then eventually, once you start reading it out loud, you can put that together. I forgot to give that note to my students, and they came back to class. And were like, and I like, it was the King Arthur, the Vulgate cycle, and they were like, I was like, so what happened?
Like someone got smoked with a word horde. We don't really know. I'm gonna take another question. Over there.
Hi. So this is kind of for both of you to answer. As an aspiring writer myself, I'm always curious, like, how do you borrow from like today's geopolitics or even past geopolitics or even just national politics and incorporate them into your story without your own personal beliefs and biases getting in the way? Especially like for me, prevalent as like a woman of color, like it's really hard when you like have to write a world building story that's realistic, but then you don't always agree with like the oppression that is faced So you kind of add your own biases and personal beliefs, if that makes sense.
You should definitely lean into that. Like, Mirage is definitely me going, hey, colonialism is bad and it sucks, and here are like the specific things that are like horrifying about it, right? Like, there's, especially as a woman of color, don't, like, your biases are correct, right? Right? Like, as a colonized subject, like, if you were a white girl, I'd be like, you need some beta readers. But your biases are correct, right? And so, to me, it was much easier to write it because I wasn't writing from the point of view of the oppressor, right? And so in that way, the biases that are built into that and the ways in which like those characters have to reckon with the violence of those politics or whatever become the conflict of the book and are also not unrealistic, right? Like the language issues and stuff like that, like that's all drawn from my personal experience. That's all me being like, I have lots of friends who can't speak Arabic, and like my Arabic, I can read Arabic and I can speak classical Arabic, but nobody speaks classical Arabic. I tried to speak classical Arabic to my aunt once and she started laughing. Right? When they teach you like modern standard Arabic in college and you go over there, everybody's laughing at you. Nobody says enti, wahia, like nobody says any, no. You all don't know, thank you. I'm so glad you're laughing at my jokes.
You sound like you're saying the nightly news, but you're like, hello, at 7, I am hungry.
Right,
That's
exactly.
what you sound like to
Nobody
people. You're
speaks like that, right?
Tonight, I would like some dinner. Thank you.
Right. But so part of the crux of Mirage is that like what happens to our communities when we're under siege and we're losing language as a home space, right? And that's very much my bias as a woman who's the daughter of an immigrant who, up until 2 years ago, I didn't know she spoke Tishohit because she wasn't allowed to speak Tishohit in school, right? Because it was an Arabized state and you were beaten if you spoke anything but French or Arabic.
I think I would say too that you should lean into your biases, but you should also understand that you have the choice whether when you are presenting oppression or not presenting oppression. There is no, you are choosing, especially if you're writing fantasy, you can create the world any way you want to create it. And if you do choose to echo real world oppression or you do choose to echo real world prejudice, then make sure it's a choice. Okay? Just make sure you're not like, and I say this as something like, make sure you're not falling into a pattern of saying, well, I've experienced this or I've seen this, and therefore it should exist in this exact same way. I've had people ask me, why is there no homophobia in Six of Crows or Crooked Kingdom or in the Grishaverse? And I was like, because I got to choose. There doesn't actually have to, I could choose to create a world that might have many different problems. It might have sexism and racism and prejudice, but it doesn't have to have this particular one that it's carrying with it.
Another question?
Hi, so you've talked about a lot of the research that you did and you had all of this knowledge and everything put together. So once you had all of that, what was the process of your writing? Did you have a routine?